Hello, my name is Peter Bowler and welcome back to Pete's Profundities and Profanities. And to this instalment, which as previously promised, focuses upon the Beatles and specifically the question, are they overrated? I'm going to start by answering my own question with a resounding no, 1,000 times no. For my money, they are undisputedly, unquestionably, undeniably, undoubtedly the greatest band there ever was, there ever has been, or there ever will be. And I hope that's sufficiently emphatic for you. So why the question in the first place, you may ask? Well, it all started with a certain very well-known radio broadcaster in the London region who, for the purposes of this exercise, we shall simply refer to as Bert, and who makes his loathing of all things fab abundantly clear to the point where he steadfastly refuses to play any of their records on any of his shows, on the somewhat nebulous grounds that he considers them to be overrated and puerile. To be honest, I've never heard so much counterintuitive, preposterous nonsense in all my puff. And this instalment is essentially what I wrote to him, without, I might just add, ever receiving the courtesy of a response, even if this were only to say something along the lines of, you can take your revolver and stick it where the sun don't shine. And the problem is that I have a lot of time for this presenter, for his undoubted style, his knowledge of London, and I would even say his taste, if it weren't for this particular and highly dubious blind spot. Anyway, what it was that I felt compelled and sufficiently exercised to put to him was essentially as follows. I absolutely understand that an appreciation of performers and their artistic expression is a highly subjective matter, and one that is according to personal taste. Having said that, I would contend that there exists a special category of performer/artist whose exceptionality and genius is so self-evident that is simply not just a matter of opinion. By saying, I understand your aversion, what I'm actually saying is that I understand it in much the same way as I would anyone who considered Muhammad Ali to be a slugger, George Best a kick-and-run exponent, Laurence Olivier an old ham, or Rudolf Nureyev a clodhopper. In short, their genius was so self-evident to anyone who had eyes to see or ears to hear that a denial of this is nothing more than a perverse, counterintuitive, controversialist exercise in attention-seeking. I would have no hesitation whatsoever in placing the Beatles amongst this elite category as being the most universally popular, the most successful, the most creative, the most innovative, the most influential, the most covered, in short, the most important band that the world has ever known or will ever know. I would go far as to repeat my previously stated contention that not only did the Beatles capture the zeitgeist of their times, they were its zeitgeist. I would also suggest that the Fabs claim as close as anyone ever could to disproving the age-old adage that you can't please all of the people all of the time. So let's address these achievements, Bert, where we can, with acknowledgement and thanks to hooksandharmony.com. During the week of April the 4th, 1964, The Beatles occupied the top 5 positions in the Billboard Hot 100 singles chart, 12 in the top 100. The top 2 positions on the US albums chart, the number 1 position in the UK singles chart, and the first 2 positions in the UK albums chart. The most complete domination of the British and American charts in history. Prior to 1961, no British artist had ever topped the Billboard Hot 100, and there had only been 2 up to the emergence of the Beatles. To put this in perspective, the Fabs had 6 Billboard Hot 100 number 1s in 1964 alone. To date, the Beatles have sold well over 1 billion records. That's billion with a capital B, and it is without including the approaching 200 million units they have collectively sold after the group's breakup. In the year 2000, some 30 years after they broke up, their second major greatest hits compilation, One, spent 8 weeks at number 1 and sold 13 million copies in its first month of release. A testimony, if ever one were needed, to their enduring and phenomenal legacy and popularity. They achieved 20 number 1 singles and 15 number 1 albums in the UK, 20 number 1 singles and 19 number 1 albums in the US. The Beatles have 12 of the 100 most successful songs of all time, and also 7 of the 100 most successful albums in history. In both cases, the most by far of any artist. No other act has ever engendered the anticipation that preceded a new Beatles release. In 1963, the advance orders, yes, that's simply advance orders, of I Want to Hold Your Hand exceeded 1 million in the UK alone. And the only reason it didn't immediately go to number 1 was that their previous single, She Loves You, occupied that position after a resurgence in sales. It was also the second highest selling single of the decade, just behind, yes, you guessed it, She Loves You. There had been adulation of music artists before, but nothing had ever or has ever come remotely close to the global phenomenon that was Beatlemania. They were groundbreaking pioneers almost from the beginning, being the first group ever to employ feedback on 1964's I Feel Fine, and A Hard Day's Night features an opening chord so revolutionary that it took almost 45 years for someone to figure out how it was created. 1965's Rubber Soul and the follow-up Revolver saw more innovation, from the use of a sitar on Norwegian Wood to tape loops on Tomorrow Never Knows, and then the backward vocals on Rain and a Moog synthesizer on several songs on 1969's Abbey Road. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band is arguably the greatest album ever made. Indeed, it topped Rolling Stone's list of these. And whilst it may not necessarily have the strongest material, the album itself was a landmark in recording. It popularised the concept album, and with Peter Blake's assistance and the inclusion of lyrics for the first time on the reverse of the gatefold sleeve, they revolutionised the art of album cover design. Arguably, their third best songwriter, George Harrison, wrote a song, Something, that Frank Sinatra somewhat confusingly called his favourite Lennon and McCartney composition, and a number of others that would grace any album at any time. According to Stacker.com 21, the top 50 most covered songs of all, 21 of the top 50 most covered songs of all time are Beatles songs. With George Martin's invaluable assistance, they revolutionised the science of recording using multiple tracks, varying tape speeds and sophisticated string arrangements. In an age where other people wrote songs for the flavour of the day, think broad building, the Beatles astonished everyone by writing their own hits from the very beginning, and helped usher in and popularise the artist as a songwriter. Their ability to cross over from media and mop-top teen idols to musical innovators is without precedent or equal. Their chart success and initial popularity are unparalleled, but despite their enormous and quite extraordinary initial fame, they managed to continue to improve throughout their career. Their place in popular culture is unrivaled. Their films, their appearance on The Ed Sullivan Show, in which they played to over 75 million people, their refusal to play in concert after 1966 without any impact whatsoever on their popularity. One could quite literally go on and on. And all this accomplished in just 7 short recording years. To coin an old phrase, Bert, put that in your pipe and smoke it. In conclusion, I do hope that my musings and observations do not come across as condescending or excessively combative, as that was never my intention. What continues to remain genuinely puzzling to me, however, is that someone with such obviously discerning taste should possess such a glaring blind spot. I'm certainly under no illusions that you'll be persuaded by my arguments, and that of course is entirely your prerogative. But just maybe they will give you reason to pause for thought and reflect upon your perfectly legitimate, if, may I politely suggest, fundamentally flawed, aversion to and dismissal of the greatest band the world has ever known or will ever know. And there, my lord, I rest my case. Thank you once again for listening to this instalment of Pete's Profundities and Profanities, and I'll look forward very much to catching up with you again soon. In my next instalment, I will be turning my attention to the rise, decline and fall of musical theatre and musicals. May your God go with you, and as always, take good care of you and yours. Bye for now.